Welcome to Curious Life of a Child-Free Woman, a podcast celebrating unexpected choices, honest conversations, and the infinite possibilities of a happy, child-free life. I'm your host, Emily Paulsen. Each week, we'll meet inspiring guests, pushing boundaries, leading change, and redefining personal fulfillment. This is not about comparison, it's about possibility. Whether you're child-free by choice, circumstance, still deciding, or simply interested in fresh perspectives for limitless living, I am so happy you're here. Let's get curious together. I am so excited to welcome today's guest, Janet Alexandersson. Janet is a creative at heart, sprouting new side projects and art projects every single year. She is also the founder of the boutique law firm, Piggy Bank Legal. I am absolutely obsessed with the name of your law firm. She helps professionals add revenue streams through licensing by offering a unique combination of business advisory and legal services. Janet is celebrating 20 years as a lawyer and loves to chat about entrepreneurship, creativity, and philosophy. Welcome, Janet.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, I'm so happy you're here. Okay, let's get right into it. As we just said, you start all of these projects every year. You start a new, I'm not going to use the phrase side hustle, but a side project and an art project on top of your work as an attorney. So tell the people, what are all these cool things that you have going on? Tell us more.
So I think it all stems from curiosity. So one of the projects that I have is called Meta Observer, and it's essentially sort of actionable philosophy, 20 plus frameworks distilling down principles like values and ethics and power into their core building blocks. And then you can apply that to whatever you want to professionally or personally. So I think all of my side projects, even like Delphi cards, kind of getting to know yourself cards, are about understanding who we are better or understanding what you want better in some way, shape, or form. Even if they have like a legal slant, it's still about decision making and moving yourself forward in life somehow, I think. And also a lot of like aesthetics, because I can't help myself.
And you're very good at it. You are an artist. I think of you as an artist. So you bring the
Thank you.
aesthetics to all of these things that you do for sure.
It's good to know.
It's true. Okay, so clearly you have a passion for this idea of really exploring ourselves. I love that you said curiosity. Curiosity is important to me and everybody who's here listening. That's really why this podcast exists, to learn more about ourselves and to learn more about the world. But even if we just take this piece of the fact that you're bringing this to life through fully flushed out projects, these are things that you have available. Some of the things you create are available for free, some are paid. Why is kind of keeping this volume of projects or pursuits important to you? This takes a lot of time and energy. So how are you able to really prioritize doing so much year after year?
I think it comes down to seeing my projects as projects and not side hustles. So they're more in the hobby category. So like if I was a bird watcher, I'd be spending a lot of time in the forest. So the things that I do with my time is this, I guess, creative pursuit. And to me, it's kind of a way to engage the world, I would say. You don't have to always do that with a person directly. It's like more on a global scale if you're making something that is available to everyone, or to just like a really simple scale. Like, this is something I was curious about and I wanted to see that be a thing. I can't really give you a better answer because I have actually not thought about the proper why, more so than it's a need. I just have to do it. I think it's part of my personality and my makeup, not so much, oh, I chose to do this. I've always been doing this since I was with all. You don't want to see the early ones. That hilarious. But the ones that I have now are the ones that I've survived. A lot of them have been deleted, and I don't really see those as not being valuable either. It's just I enjoy the process more than the end product. So it's really me just expressing myself, I think.
I love that. Self-expression is so important.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I think that process of iterating over time is another way that we can learn more about ourselves just
Yeah.
by trying something, exploring something, even by being open, like hearing ourselves enough to know, what am I curious about? What would be really interesting to me, whether it's something to make money from or just as you said, a hobby. I really admire people as adults who have all of these diverse and interesting hobbies. To me, that makes you so cool.
Yeah, I think it's like one of those, like, when you talk about fashion, you talk about interest points, like we're both wearing earrings, but I think hobbies are the interest points of people, in my opinion. Like, I
Mhm.
love people who are passionate about something, so that makes them more interesting to me, not because I'm interested in what they're interested in, just because they're interested. That makes them interesting.
Yeah, and it's important to me as my life continues to develop. I wanna make time for those things because it's easy
Yeah.
to deprioritize them when it's like, "Okay, here's the stuff that I have to get done in a week. I don't have to go bird watching necessarily on Tuesday night, or I don't have to
Yeah.
do my knitting or work on my puzzles," or, these are things that I keep saying I'm gonna do as a hobby. So it's
Mhm.
very aspirational to me to meet somebody like you who is involved in so many different types of pursuits. And I'm like, yes, this is part of why I find you such a joy to speak to and so interesting to talk to, as you just said, because you're exploring your own interests.
Yeah, I think a lot of people stop also because they feel like they have to be good at it. But you don't have
Mhm.
to be good at a hobby, you just have to enjoy it. And I think I've allowed myself to do sort of the same with most of the projects. The ones that are still public turned out sort of good-ish or very good.
Mhm.
But there's many that aren't up anymore because I don't feel like they have the quality that I want to represent, but they are still something that was good for me to do.
Mhm. Yeah, part of your past. I mean, we don't have
Yeah.
to keep every single thing that we've ever tried with us all the time. I mean, it lives in us as a past experience,
Yeah.
but we don't have to keep pumping it out or telling people about it or showing it to people. And I
Yeah.
think that's an important point. This stuff can evolve. And hobbies are supposed to feel fun and light, but it can feel like, okay, I bought a sewing machine or I told so
Yeah.
and so I was going to learn this or, whatever. And then you feel really tied to it and turns out I hate it or, whatever. And then it's hard to let those things go. So, yeah, I think keeping it really fun and light is a critical part of maintaining this type of attitude.
Yeah, and I think that's why I have the diversity in my projects. Like they're not really linked to each other, less like my undercurrent of philosophy maybe. But I think if they were on the same industry or in the same focus, I would get bored. It will start be like you said, like it's more like homework than
Mm.
expression.
Which is no fun. We
Mhm.
have plenty of that we have to do to get
Yeah.
through daily life. Real work. Great. Tell me more about philosophy. Like when you introduced yourself to me, and I think this all comes down to self identity, which is something I'd really like to explore with you.
Yeah.
So you're an attorney, but when you introduced yourself to me when we met, you described yourself as a creative. And we talked a lot about philosophy really early on. I hear the word philosophy, I think of a college class. When you talk about that as an interest, what does that mean to you?
I think it comes down to curiosity and how you can be fascinated by things and wanting to understand them better. And like philosophy is just really how we understand our experience as humans in some basic shape. And to me, if you look at the Latin definition, curiosity comes from a Latin word. I don't speak Latin, but I speak Spanish. So somewhere around cura, which means to care. So to be curious means that you care. So if you're engaged in modern philosophy as a hobbyist, it's just this catch caught my interest. What does it mean? How do you do that? What are the parts that make that specific thing up? That's it. It doesn't have to be complex, and you don't have to go back and read all the old philosophers and like the Stoics and Kierkegaard and his wacky way of viewing the world. Like you don't have to understand any of that. You just have to understand how you see the world and what your values are and why you think things happen and like cause and effect for you. And it might be good if that starts to become really complicated to read up a little bit about what other people are experiencing as well, but it doesn't have to be some sort of old Greek dude that tells
To
you what the world is because philosophy also is evolving and it depends on your culture context and all of that. So to me, I think philosophy and creativity come really hand in hand because it's all a lens for how to view the world, art or philosophy. So to me, they're the same in many ways. It's just that one maybe is easier for other people to consume, as in understanding your point of view, whereas art can
Mhm.
be a bit, subjective.
I like the way that you connected those. And I don't think I've ever heard anybody talk about curiosity as a way to care or an expression of care in ourselves or in other people.
Yeah, curiosity is one of my core values. But this year, I also heard someone say that curiosity was their love language. And I'm like, yes, that's what it is. And she also mentioned this root word. So I'm like, this captures everything because it really means like if you're not curious about something, it means that you don't really care about it. Like, I'm not
True.
super. curious about how to program a car for self-driving. I'm not super curious because I don't
Mm.
care.
And that's fine
Yeah.
too, right?
Yeah.
Like we don't have
So
capacity to be curious about everything, but continuing to kind of unravel that within ourselves and then give ourselves the grace to pursue or at least kind of check into those things that spark.
yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's a really fun way to live life.
Yeah. It is. I
I
recommend it.
Me too, me too.
Yeah.
And I think everybody here is into it too, so we're in
Yeah.
good company. Okay, so this idea of being curious and exploring ourselves, exploring the things we care about is sort of a means to get to know about the world around us. I love this concept of modern philosophy and kind of modernizing things that we might think about from Philosophy 101 or Sociology 101 that we learned in college. And I think a lot of us are interested in those courses, but they don't necessarily align with our career track. So we
Mhm.
abandon that type of thinking. And then we think, oh, that's all in the past. I like this idea of bringing it forward to the future and I'm really interested in getting to know myself better. I used to think that sounded almost selfish or arrogant, like, what a waste of time. I'm on this pursuit to understand me. Either I should understand me already because I am me, or like, use your talents to help other people, you know? And I like this idea, or I don't even know if it's an idea. It feels more and more like reality that the better you understand yourself, the better you can serve other people. And I'm using the phrase serve as in love, pay attention to, actually acts of service, anything that we're doing to relate to the people in our lives. I think the more we understand ourselves, the better that we're able to do that and the better we're able to empathize and understand others.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you strike me as a woman who really knows herself. You have this incredible thing on your Instagram, the Brave Negotiators Manifesto. Can I read
Mm.
that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. This is what you share in this manifesto. I am curious. I ask questions and listen for clues. I enter the conversation after doing my homework. I have standards and expectations. I'm the guardian of my boundaries, and I will help you maintain yours. I expect you to care about my best interest as well as yours. I'm comfortable with being silent while you think over what I said. I say no, and I mean it. I seek to fully understand your no. My mission is to find out what matters to you and see if it fits with what matters to me. I'm willing to walk away instead of compromising my values. I'm not always confident, but I am always brave. Janet, mic drop. Amazing. You say so many things in there, like especially the pieces about being comfortable waiting, right? Like a lot of what you're saying here is being comfortable with the no, being comfortable with the pause, having enough comfort and I know you said you're not always confident, but it's a level of confidence in yourself to
Yeah.
let the other person have their experience without that totally shifting your experience. How do you get to this place?
I have to give you a bit of backstory because you would
Please.
have met me when I was like 11 to like 18. Shyest human being on the planet. Like when you're out biking and you want to turn, you maybe like stretch out your hand or like you make a sign. Didn't want to do it because I didn't want people to see me. Never raised my hand in school. Like very painfully shy. And then I went to law school. Great decision making. Perfect fit. But eventually, this kind of is the philosophy that emerged. We had a lot of problem based learning at my university, a lot of student led teaching, and a lot of interfacing for negotiation, because this is kind of what this manifesto is aiming at. Not necessarily legal negotiation, because anytime you have to find an agreement with someone, you are in fact negotiating, even if it's just with the pizza place on about how much sauce you want on your pizza. So to me, this is kind of evolved into a place where I can feel comfortable doing that as a person who wasn't confident in the beginning. So approaching it with my natural curiosity takes the pressure off from being professional or knowing everything. So if I'm curious, I'm going to figure out what they want. And in negotiations, you often think it's a zero sum game, that they want what I
Mhm.
want and we're going to power struggle and divide the cake. But usually, maybe I want cake, but they want hamburgers. And you won't really know that until you're curious. And oftentimes, when you're talking to people like that and you say no or they say no, it doesn't really mean the end. It just means this is not the path that I want to take, or no can mean I feel insecure about this or I don't understand this, but people don't really say that. For me, this manifesto is kind of a framework for how to just sit with a situation with someone else until we understand what we both want from it. It works with yourself as well. That's what I'm going to point out. Like you can do
Mm,
this with yourself as well, not just with other people.
there's so much power in being quiet. And as somebody who is an extrovert, it sounds like we had almost opposite upbringing or personalities, I should say,
Uh-huh.
in our young life. If you were feeling painfully shy, I was being told to quit talking. I did love following rules, so I wasn't breaking rules, but I express everything out loud. And I think that makes me admire people who can just pause or wait or be patient and kind of let those gaps happen and use them to be thinking about, okay, well, what is really happening here? Where can I go with this next? Instead of just like this urgency to come up with something, say something, like fill in all of those things. I think that the way that my tendency to do that kind of taint the curiosity because it's like, okay, am I really being curious about what's happening here, big picture? Whether we're talking about pizza sauce or something really big and meaningful,
Yeah.
am I really tuned in to the big picture of what's going on, or am I just focused on like every other word and how I can address that sentence? Not that I'm only listening to talk, but I'm like focused on every segment of the conversation at times versus what's happening overall.
Yeah. Yeah. But I also think we're taught to do that. We're taught to volley, right?
Mm,
That
yeah, volley,
conversation.
that's a great word.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah, what I like about the approach that I have is that it works equally well for someone who was like teenage you, being very on and like the pause makes you pause then. So then we get somewhere. But it also
Mm,
would have worked on painfully shy me because I would eventually have the space to say something at least. So
mhm.
it kind of is a universal approach, just like approaching it with curiosity and seeing what people really want. And it's also an exploration of what you want, because if you talk to people long enough, you're going to realize that they have things to offer that you couldn't even know to ask for because you didn't know about them.
Yes.
Yeah.
I find this very encouraging. I'm gonna give you credit on my Post-it, but I'm gonna put it on a Post-it. Put it on my computer screen because, yes, I think there's just so much richness there about being in our power, but that doesn't mean that it is being the most confident person in the room or leading with ego. And, it's actually quite the opposite of that, leading with
Yeah.
just openness to listen and learn. And I feel like that's your manifesto for actually doing that in action. It's one thing to say, yes, I want to be a really open listener, but having kind of some boundaries in place or some ideas in mind for how to do that tactically in conversations, big and small. I think that's so helpful.
And also, as a head fake, if you do that, people will perceive you as confident, even if you're just being brave, you know?
Yes, it's so true. I'm wowed when I get on a call with people and they just spend a lot of time pausing. I always think, man, this person, this person has it going on. They're so cool, calm, and collected. So, yeah, it definitely worked. Okay, we've talked a lot about getting to know ourselves and ways that we can do that and ways that we can get to know others by listening differently or thinking differently, approaching conversations differently. And I have definitely made the mistake of thinking, okay, the more I get to know myself and the more that I try to be this curiosity driven person, decisions will just come easier.
Mm.
Like, there's gonna be a gut instinct, and we use these phrases all the time, like gut check or tune into your intuition. I hear this a lot in the woo-woo world of like, if you have to make a big decision, meditate that morning, light a candle, really like get in touch with yourself. And sure, sometimes that's really supportive and helpful. But there are other times where they're just the decision that just never happens. There's no click into place. And maybe it's even more impactful the bigger the decision. I don't know. But it just feels like, okay, there are two distinct paths here. And I have no idea what to do. And I have to do something, right? There is no meeting in the middle. What is your what is your feeling about this? What is your thinking about decision making?
Well, specifically for the scenario that you painted, if
Mhm.
you don't really know, I have sort of two ways of looking at it. One is like which adventure sounds more like I would grow as a person. So like tying it to like what do you want to get out of life in general, not just for this decision. Or the second one, which one is more reversible? If I choose A, does that mean that I can never choose B? But if I choose B, I can still do A? That's
Mhm,
also a way of looking at it. So it's not always bad to keep your options open as long as you're at least pursuing a path while you're doing it.
mhm.
So I always think about those two. But if they're truly equal, it doesn't really matter, does it?
It doesn't really matter.
No.
That's the key thing, I think. We think so much that we wanna make the right decision or take the right next step, and
Yeah.
I think that is totally made up,
Yeah.
like,
We are
there
more.
we don't know, and we can never know what the other side was.
No, because I think we can all look back at like end of 2019. We all made decisions.
Mhm.
What happened? We all know what happened. So so even if you make the best possible decision, you're not in control.
So
And I
true.
think that's good to remember. It's better to, in many ways, unless it's like a deeply, deeply impactful decision, to make the decision and start doing and then see,
Mm,
than to just like spend years not having made a decision, even months sometimes, if it's like keeping you in a freeze state, not like flight or flight type of freeze, but like not moving forward with your life type of freeze.
you shared an article with me on this topic, and I'm gonna link it in the show notes because it was very illuminating to me, and I have already sent it to several friends. So thank you for sending this to me. In this article, it phrases it a couple different ways that almost like we have this sister life, like these moments in time come to us where we have to pick a path, we have to make a decision and move forward. And depending on the type of decision, you can never know what the other answer would have led to. Like, you can't walk both paths. You can't decide to go to 2 universities for your first year. You can't decide to marry this person or not marry this person and know for sure how it would shake out. Like, you
Yeah.
just pick a path and you move forward. So, this idea that it's almost like a ghost life or a sister life, if you would have made the other decision and it's kind of this other imaginary path that folds out in its own imaginary universe. And there's this line, again, I'll link it so people can read the whole thing, but it sort of closes by saying, I'll never know, and neither will you, of the life you don't choose. We'll only know that whatever that sister life was, it was important and beautiful and not ours. It was the ghost ship that didn't carry us. There's nothing to do but salute it from the shore. That is so powerful to me. First of all, to have the reality check that it's not that the ghost life or the ghost ship or the sister life is right and mine that I'm actually living is wrong, or vice versa. It's just that we cannot have all of the things in one lifetime. That's just not how time works.
Yeah.
What is so powerful about this to you? Why has it been memorable to you and enough so that you shared it with me?
I think it actually does come back to decision making because to me, I have a very vivid imagination. Let's just start there. I think it comes with a curiosity. So if I have two paths, I sort of imagine it, not just like visioning as fully imagining living the story in my head to the end. Not just like the first little good part or like the fulfillment of the dream, but like what comes next? Like, what is the entire path of this person? I think that's what the article prompted for me. So, doing that, just kind of a little bit beyond, you start to
Mm,
see more how the paths diverge or how they could diverge, right?
mhm.
Especially if you tack on different decisions to them. And it becomes, at least to me, clearer and clearer the further I go beyond the decision impacting me, what I want. But it's also, I think, a way of letting go, like imagining like this is the Janet that would have had a life doing this, and that would have been great. But I think this Janet, who is me, is gonna go ahead and do the other thing. Yeah.
Yes, I do think it helps with letting go. Is there a decision in your life that comes to mind as we're talking about this where you kind of feel like, okay, this is something where I can imagine the sister life or that you even still think of? Like, is there a decision that is related to this?
Yes and no, because it wasn't entirely in my hands, but it's a sister life that I imagine a lot. So I was an exchange student at University of Toronto over 20 years ago. We're not going to talk about how long. So
Doesn't matter, irrelevant.
but yes. And I had the opportunity to just stay in Toronto, finish out my master's, and just make a life. And I loved that city and I wanted to stay. For many complex reasons, the choice was made to go back home. And
And where is
I'm
home?
sort of home to me is in Sweden. At that point at least it was in Sweden. So I've always kind of been on the path that I want to go back. And as you know, I am moving back. So that's nice. It's happening, but it's been a long time coming. But to me, I always imagine like, what would this person be that stayed? But every time I get sucked into that, and I can feel the joy in her, and she would have been very happy, but also she wouldn't have been me. Because there's so many things that I've got to experience, both good and bad, that have shaped who I am now. And I really love what I do with my life currently. And that would never happen. Or not never, but it's unlikely that things would have fallen out the same way if I would have stayed. So I think for
Mhm.
me, that's the one that comes up the most, but I also think it's a good exercise for people in general to do that because going back to something that happened like 10 years ago or 20 years ago will show you how much that person would have experienced in a different direction.
Yes, I agree. I think it's a really powerful exercise. And it's interesting how much this is tied to location, or it can be. I
Yeah.
think maybe that's just a really tangible way for us to visualize a different life path. And the first time I read it, I thought the same thing about I'm from Ohio. I started my career in Columbus, Ohio. My best friend, my brother, my family is in that area. And I stayed, for multiple jobs. I had this longing to move to Chicago, which is where I live now. And I picked that path. And like, yes, you're moving back to Toronto. I could always live in Columbus, Ohio in the future, but you can't redo this time, right?
No.
Like my 30s and this almost decade that I've been here, that is finite. Like I could never repeat that. And yeah, it's so interesting and I think really beautiful to be able to visualize how that would look and how that would feel if I stayed there. And I have a very clear picture of that. It's certainly not all bad. I could see a lot of upside, but it isn't what I really needed and wanted. And, it's just not the path that I chose. So it feels like a really nice way to not just think through decisions, but also maybe grieve the parts of the decision that
Yes.
we don't make.
Yes. Yes, and I think the grieving process is maybe the most important one once you've made the decision. Or even if you like sort of pre-grieve both paths, you'll know which one is causing you the most distress of grieving in. That's also a way to make a choice, I think. But yeah, definitely the grieving process I think is underestimated for choosing not to have something in your life as well. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, let's relate this to one big decision, being
Yeah.
child free,
Yeah.
which I go back and forth on this. You and I are both child free by choice. And sometimes I think of it as a decision. Other times I feel like it's a core part of who I am. Like growing up, I didn't necessarily know for sure forever that I didn't want to be a mother, but I never did want to be a mother. I just wasn't sure if that desire would come. And I think when you're young, you just don't know. Like being a parent feels like a grown up thing. So you just don't know what it'll be like when you're grown up. But as that time passed, I just felt more and more, I guess, solidified in my existence and my identity as a non-parent. Like that just felt like it's not who I am. It's not some decision that I'm like waffling on. It feels like a part of my identity. Before I ask more stuff, tell me, what does it feel like for you?
I think for me it was never something that I actively knew that I wanted.
Hmm.
And I also really have always known that I have no desire to be pregnant specifically, which is kind of an odd thing to know early, but I did. And to me, it was more like I would answer questions as appropriately, right? How many kids do you want? Two. Like I would just not really do it with what I actually wanted. I would just like say whatever people expect. But I've never had the desire. I've never dreamed about babies. I was not really playing with dolls. Like it's not really been my thing. But I think I needed to actually make the conscious choice
Hmm.
to feel like I no longer had to conform in my answers, if that makes sense.
It
Yeah.
does make sense. Yeah, because these questions come our way. Maybe this happens for all people. It definitely happens for women at a weirdly young age. People
Mhm.
are dreaming of their wedding. And I remember being in conversations freshman year of high school with the cheerleaders, and people are talking about baby names, for their future babies. Like, so you're not always ready for these questions and conversations that come up. So yeah, it makes total sense to be like, yeah, two kids, and I'll name them like Edith and Joe. I don't know. You're just like going with the flow. And
Uh-huh.
then eventually it's like, okay, for real though. Like I'm of an age where I could do this or I have a partner where we could do this, then it does become a little bit more serious, or I guess it can, and kind of, I don't want to say drawing a line in the sand, but I guess picking a path.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. And I think I've always sort of, like you said, known like deep down. It's just society pressures us really early. But I
Mhm,
didn't really make the, oh, I'm going to sit down and actually make the decision because I want to know what I want until like
mhm.
mid to late 30s. Because I think that you have a knowing or like you feel like you have a preference, but if you, unless you take the time to really consider, you haven't really made a decision, I feel like. So, yeah.
Mhm. Yes, it does take time. And something I really hope to accomplish with these conversations is to encourage everybody to give themselves that time and to not fall into the automated next steps, and maybe to think about these two sister life paths. And, for a lot of people to recognize it's not like, oh, this one would be torture and this one would be perfect. No, like there's going to be problems with both. We're going to miss out on things with both. We're going to have one of a kind experiences with both. So, giving ourselves the space to get really curious, spend time exploring passions and pursuits that help us understand ourselves, and then really thinking through these life paths in a non judgmental way, I think is really important.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think part of the reason that I wanted to make a decision, if we're going to call it that formally, was because I got a lot of feedback. Like, what if you meet someone and they really want kids and then maybe you want kids? And I'm like, I see a trap. Because if I get super story eyed about someone, I might think that kids are a good idea because my hormones are telling me. I want to know what I want, not
Hmm.
because someone looks like they would produce good kids. We're not taking that path on accident or because we're hormonal. So I wanted to know what I want in isolation before I was faced with that decision.
That is so wise. There is a little bit of us that's fighting against the hormones. I also think mine have just, I don't know, mine are like turned off or something. Like went for the maternal nurturing thing.
Yeah, no.
I don't have. So, as much as it seems other women who I am connected to do have it. But yeah, I think there's a whole other whole, not just society, but with a partner. And of course, when you love someone so much, there's this whole romanticized element of it too, which does not take into account the day to day existence of what it would be. It's just this person is so hot. You sure their baby would be hot, and
Yeah.
what would their eye color be? Like, which none of those are real reasons to procreate, in my opinion. Like, if you're basing it off that, but it comes into your brain.
Oh, same for me. Like I am a genetic potpourri, so I'm often like, what would it look like if we combine with this person? And then like, you're really curious, but you can just do an AI DNA simulation and you will be satisfied. And you don't have to raise a human to find out. So
Yeah.
yeah, and I also, to me, it was also a lot of these are all the things that I will not get to do if I go down that path, and a lot of weird things that I don't think other people consider. But for me, for importance, I consider them. Like how many books I won't get to read. I did a
That's not weird.
calculation of how many books I could potentially read in a lifetime reasonably, which didn't feel enough, even without children, and then subtracting all the time for kids. I know this sounds entirely too nerdy, but that's what I did because I wanted to know. Because it is really about, like, we have finite time, at least in this existence, depending on how you see things. And what do you want to do with it?
Yes. We have one life that we live. We can have these sister lives, you can have these ghost ships, but we have
Yeah.
one life that we get to live here, and we can't control it. We can't predict it. But I think understanding ourselves and remaining open to everyone around us who we want to take in, and just taking one step at a time toward the things that feel really aligned and good, that's really all we can do.
Yeah. And I also think a lot of people have the fear of like, what if I don't have family or what if I don't have
Mm.
connections? So there's so many ways to build that with other people in general. And there are also a lot of young people who are now adults that don't have family. Who's to say that you can be a retired person opening up your home for holidays to people who don't have anywhere else to go? You can do it in so many different ways and build intentional families and connections with people. So a baby is not a family guarantee.
Very true. I love taking a really creative approach, which is just what you outlined, to having all of this love in our lives and all of this connection and traditions and rituals and sharing these really intimate and important pieces of ourselves for the rest of our lives with other people, thinking creatively about who those people are or what that looks like, that's really exciting to me. Like, I am blessed with parents and a brother who I love and get along with. So that's great. We have that kind of traditional nuclear family. We also live in different states. I don't see them as much as I would like to. And being able to not just fill in those gaps, but being able to kind of spread that love around, or those deep unconditional bonds to have more than just my parents and my brother. It makes me feel like rich. Oh my gosh, I'm the luckiest to have found this in somebody I got randomly roomed with in college, or, some boyfriend's friend's girlfriend who now I'm really close. Like, there's just so many different ways to connect with people over the course of our lives. And to think about that really creatively seems really cool.
I think it's always come natural to me. So I was adopted as a baby. So I
Mm.
already kind of from an early age know that families aren't necessarily forever or like the constellations aren't rigid. So to me, it's always been kind of a mystery that there's such a focus on romantically based family relationships, if that makes sense. Like romance brings people together and they create a family, but why are we disregarding friendships? I think in many ways, friends are as much family, even if we don't call it family. The way we respond and relate and how we spend time together is in a familial way.
And those familial bonds are extra special in a way because you find them out in the world as yourself. They're not baked into who you know or who you spend time with. You have to carve that path yourself.
You just meet people who fit you. Like you're lucky if your family fits you because that was karma or fate or chance or whatever you want to call it. But your friends you choose.
And yeah, oh my gosh. Could have a whole conversation about friendship.
Yeah.
I think it
Yeah.
is so interesting how we're drawn to other people, whether we meet as when you're both kids or you're both teenagers or you're both. And then I think it's really cool in adulthood to have friends that are 2 decades above or below you, like
Yeah.
just to have all these different perspectives coming together. To me, it's a privilege to get to have those connections, but I think they make everybody more tolerant and understanding. Just that breadth of perspectives can really have power.
Yeah. And to me, like this was one of the factors in not wanting to have children as well, because I see how my friends with children sort of drop off for a good 10 years at least
Uh-huh.
while they're in the midst of it. I'm not saying that they shouldn't, like kids deserve that attention, but you are going to sacrifice other relationships in order to raise a human without having anything bad happening to it.
Hmm.
So friendships are something that I can prioritize and I want to in many ways. So yeah, I think that's part of it too.
Yes. And we can prioritize, like, I want to be my friend's baby's friend. I'm
Yes.
always like, all right, I want to be friends with your baby. Like,
Mhm.
I'm friends with
Yeah.
you, so
Yeah.
that brings in that whole other element of just multiple generations, multiple points in life that all really is held together through friendship.
Yes, and I like we looking back at how humans have lived, we're always lived communally, and that's there's always been generations and also people without children to
Huh?
support the entire village, so to speak.
Yes, our roles matter.
Yeah.
They
And
really do.
even if we don't want to support children, we matter. I'm just gonna put that out there because not everyone likes children. I happen to like children
Hmm.
at certain ages, let's be specific. But still,
Yeah,
you can still contribute to your community even if you maybe mostly care about elder people or people your age. Like it doesn't really matter,
it doesn't really matter. Caring is caring.
Yeah.
This is a safe space for people who just don't vibe with babies or kids. So, yeah, we
Yeah.
can certainly say that here. It isn't for everybody, and that's
Mhm.
totally fine.
And I think it's even better that you recognize that it's not for you because I feel very strongly about people only having children if they want to have children.
I agree. It's
Yeah.
back to those decision points. This is a serious one. The
Yeah.
life path becomes the life path when you decide to be a parent. That never falls off of your journey. So, yes, intention is so critical. And having the capacity to be intentional is really a self pursuit that for this decision and all decisions that I think is really worthwhile.
Yeah.
Janet, I could talk to you forever. Thank you so much for coming here and sharing all of this. I have a closing question for you since this podcast is about curiosity and naturally we've discussed curiosity a lot.
Yeah.
What is something that you are curious about for the future? Tell me something that you would like to learn or explore next.
I have something that I think is going to become an actual business, one of my side projects,
Okay,
and
I'm
it's called
intrigued.
The Reviewed Self. So it's very in line with everything I've done. It's essentially becoming your own oracle by understanding yourself better through observations, annual reviews, but also like situational reviews, like I just got a promotion. What's that about? Or I'm at this milestone in life. What does that mean? What is like the last decade of my life? What did that look like? What's my intention for the next decade? Things like that. So I'm putting together some resources and hopefully they can help people understand themselves better. So it's a passion project, but I am also going to make it a business.
Fabulous. I love the name. I want to partake and whatever that looks like. So
Yeah.
share it with me when it's ready, and I'll send it out to this audience too, because I think a lot of us would be curious about that.
I let you know.
Perfect. Amazing. And for those who do want to connect with you after listening to all of your insights here, where can people find you?
The easiest way to find me would be my personal website, I think. You'll probably link to it because the spelling is not straightforward. And then a dot
I will
com.
link to it.
Yeah, yeah. And if you want to chat about these things, there's probably a link to have a lemonade chat with me on that site. So we can have a chat about things.
Thank you so much for being here with me, Janet. Thank you to everyone who listened, and we will see you in the next episode. Thank you for listening to Curious Life of a Child-Free Woman. I did not really get this until I became a podcast host, but if you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, rate, and consider taking 2 minutes to leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Turns out, it really does make a difference. You can become a Curious Life insider at CuriousLifeOfAChildFreeWoman.com. Follow us on Instagram at Curious Life of a Child-Free Woman, and feel free to share this episode with a curious friend. Friendship is everything to me, so every recommendation really means the world. Until next time, keep learning, stay curious, and know that you'll never walk the child-free journey alone.